Hi there, and welcome to Numbers Don't Lie. I'm Brad Pinzer.
I'm Janelle Sakura, and we have more marketing insights for accountants today. So I'm really excited because we have an awesome guest with us today, Julie Smith, who is the practice manager for Harper and Company CPAs Plus and founder of I don't know how many other companies at this point, Julie. I will let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your companies and all of the ventures that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle and Brad. So we have Harper and Company, which is kind of our main CPA consulting firm, which is where our advisory kind of started. And, sometimes when you go into something, you never know what your passion is going to be coming out of that. And I really found a passion for trying to help other CPA firms get out of their own way, essentially, and run a firm in today's generation almost. And so really like to go in and consult with other CPA firms and help them kind of change and create balance and basically get paid for what they've been doing this entire time. And then we also have a podcast called Empowering Entrepreneurs, which came out of COVID, right? It felt like a really lonely time for entrepreneurs. And so wanted to create a sense of community in regards to, entrepreneurs and hearing everybody's journey. We all go through the same thing. We all go through peaks and valleys. We all, can learn and come together and lean on each other. And that's really what we wanted to do. It was really cool because I thought it was going to be client based. And I don't know, 2 weeks into it, it was, I think we went nationwide and now we're
Mhm.
worldwide. So that's been so much fun. So Empower CPA, empowering entrepreneurs. Also created Pure Tax as just a fun thing to do at the end of last year. It just felt like we'd really niched down our clientele in Harper and Company, which I think is also something CPA firms have a hard time doing. But we were turning away a ton of 1040 business. And so really just took a look and said, okay, we have the systems, processes, people, we have everything here in place. Let's just create an additional arm and have someone who just focuses on those 1040 clients. And so we started Pure Tax, and it's been a lot of fun. I think we work, with a lot of financial advisors in regards to helping and those people that maybe don't want that H&R Block feel. They want someone who, we have a storefront essentially. We're around 365 days, 24/7. And I think it all stems from a sense of community, but it literally is a sense of community amongst all of those companies. We also started a payroll company exclusive just to our clients. And I think I promised everyone I wouldn't start any more companies for a little bit. So I think that wraps it up.
That you are quite the serial entrepreneur. And one thing that I want to go back to is what you originally said about Harper and Company that, one of the important things was getting paid for the expertise that's being given out. I mean, that's kind of a novel concept, right? Because aren't accountants supposed to just be there when someone has a quote unquote quick question and just give away all their knowledge base? How did you make that change and how did you educate your clients on this as well, on the value?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that quick question, right? How many of, if accountants are listening, how many of those do you answer a day or you take a quick phone call? And I'm just thinking about, should I do this profit sharing or should I not? And any one of our staff could answer that in 2.5 seconds, right? And I think Paul Miller, who, is kind of the OG in the, advisory, he's used the example of, okay, you have a brain and someone asks you the weather, you can talk about the weather all day long. But if you use the other side of your brain that you have had to put in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of experience to be able to answer that question so fast, there's value to that because you can't just talk about the weather, right? And half the time I can talk about the weather and I'm wrong, or we're all wrong, right? And it doesn't matter. But when it comes to people's finances and business and the health of what they're doing, that takes a lot of knowledge and experience to be able to do that. And so it was a lot of convincing. Janelle, I know you and I have talked about the story, but when we first started, I kept trying to rip the Band-Aid off and trying to get, Glenn to buy into this concept of what we were doing. And next one,
Right.
Julie, next one, right? And as you guys can tell, I'm not very patient. And so he happened to be late for a client meeting and he was like, just tell him I'll be 15 minutes late. And I literally sat at my desk and thought I could do that, or I could go in there and do what I've been wanting to do. And so I walked in. You guys know I have no accounting experience. No, I still use my solar calculator. And I went over about how the firm works, what we do, and what they were going to get. And I set the second meeting up. And Glenn walks in like all distraught, because he's late. And I'm like, it's fine. We're just setting up our second meeting. They're going to get us some information. We're going to work on it, and we're going to come back and figure out what we can do for these clients. So we ripped the Band-Aid off really fast. But I think what it goes back to is I think accountants for some reason devalue their expertise. And again, it's industry wide, and it's like, well, me, I'm the opposite. I'm like, well, no, that's worth so much to, if you can solve someone's problem that quickly. And as accountants, CPAs, we know everyone's stories. We know everything about them, top down, bottom up. Not even their lawyers know that. Not even their financial advisors know what's going on. And we're able to connect those dots and provide that value for them. We should be charging for it. And I think it's just having systems and processes in place inside of your firm that can back up that mindset that really help rip that Band-Aid off, right? Because I think most firm owners know it, but they don't know what to do about it.
You do.
So
and
you
that's
gotta
what
start with your
Brad and I are
foundation,
always
right?
talking about. So in addition to the systems and processes, I think they also have to know how to package up and how to market and sell those services effectively. How would you say, what role has your brand played in pivoting away from accepting those customers that just call and want to know how much can you do my tax return for, to the real customers that you truly, truly want to work with, which are those business owners that are willing to pay whatever monthly fee they need to pay for your expertise?
Yeah. So Janelle, this is like the Bradley mic drop, right? Moment right here is I think
Right.
most firm owners don't know they have a brand. They don't know that the name of their company, their firm, is a brand, and there's value to that. That's their reputation. That's what they have to protect, and they have to define. What is your brand? What are you going to do with it? And I think part of that goes back to niching down to who you're going to serve as your clients and what does that look like. Both internal and external have to know that, right? Your internal team has to know how you're going to grow and how you're going to scale and what they can expect in. But external also needs to understand that like they're the right fit for the firm. They fit inside of our brand model. And what does that look like? And, I think oftentimes people get really like, it's a
Yeah.
lot to think about, like to build a brand, right? Even though some of these firm owners have been doing it for years, decades. And I think like just looking at that and being able then to build like the foundation. Your brand is your foundation, and being able to build up. What's your mission? What's your vision? What does your firm stand for? Do you have the right team and the right seats that fit exactly what you're going to achieve? And I think once you nail all of that down, natural attrition. You're going to lose some clients. I'm here to tell you it's okay. You're going to lose some teammates. It's okay. You don't want the wrong people in the wrong seats, right? Because at the end of the day, that's your brand. If they're not doing what you want for your brand and they're doing something
Right.
different, they're hurting,
Right.
not
So
helping,
when
right?
you talk about your brand internally, what role do you feel like marketing has on educating your clients on your brand externally or the public?
Well, I think it all starts with internal. So I think you're exactly right. So it's having those educational meetings, defining what that is internally, because I can't have, my admin team pick up the phone and take all those, new client calls if they don't understand what clients we're taking on. So they first have to understand, marketing wise, exactly where we're going and what we're doing. Once they're able to understand, okay, now we're at least getting the right people on the calendar, right? And now whoever's meeting with those clients has to understand our system, our process. What is our brand bringing to the table? What are we promising these clients? What do they even get when they sign on as a client, right? And most firms are like, wow, we haven't even thought of all of that,
Yes.
right? Like, but what are they getting and who is going to perform that? So like now you're really dialing into who's performing the service, who's doing what are they getting? You're defining out responsibilities. And I think internally, once you start doing that, you're creating a consistent product externally, which is your brand, right? And that's what we all want to do. Oftentimes, some of these CPA firms, you go in and they're very siloed, right? So we got Joe Schmo over there in the corner, and he works on Excel spreadsheets only. He keeps all of his information on Excel spreadsheets. If he's gone, no one knows anything. This person over here is using, another software. Then you kind of got the admin team trying to learn 14 different softwares to serve how many different bosses. And this is where marketing comes in, right? And defining your brand, because that hasn't been done, or else they would all be a big cohesive group.
And I think that one point you made there really about the internal understanding from internally what it is, what your brand is, and what your offer is, all those different things. If you don't do that first and you go ahead and start doing marketing, it's just going to fail. You're going to waste all this money, and it happens all the time. And you really have to take that time, however long it takes you, to figure that out and really nail that.
Well, and beyond that, Brad, it's got to be the leadership team that agrees to it. So if we're all three sitting at a table and you think our target market's different than what Janelle thinks, well, there's a sense of confusion, and now we're not all going in the same direction. And so really getting in the room and taking the gloves off per se and really hammering out what that is, I think is really hard, especially for accountant personalities. But you got to do it to move forward, or you're going to take one step forward and 5 steps back at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And also really digging into what your value is that you specifically bring, because there's a general value that accountants bring to businesses, right? But then you have your specific niche and expertise and way of delivering that value that's different than another accounting firm. And so that's all part of that process that we're talking about right now, and internally understanding that, so that when you're in there and you're sitting down with your customer, your client, you're able to, communicate that. And so I wanted to ask you, at that time when you're sitting down with somebody that's interested in working with you, and you're talking about, your services and what they need, can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what your process there, and what you go through, and how you go about that?
Yeah, so I would say it's intense, more intense than probably normal CPA firms. So they call in or they email or whatever, and they're going to get a phone call back from one of our staff. And it's going to take them through a questionnaire. Again, we're just asking them the right questions to make sure they qualify for the next meeting, right? So Glenn's time is very valuable. And I think, we can all agree firm owners usually have the most expertise that are in the firm. And so in order to qualify someone, they have to kind of go through these steps. And then they get a half-hour Zoom, Teams, or in-person meeting. And that's where we're explaining how our firm works. We're not even asking numbers. We're not even asking, we kind of know what they do. We kind of know why they're there. But we're explaining how our firm works. So we're really setting the groundwork for what's about to come. When they leave that first meeting, they know we've got to get some information from them. We expect it within 7 days. They go into kind of like a marketing flow where they're getting reminded of the expectations of the client, right? Because a lot of times accounting firms take on all those expectations themselves internally. If you don't have the buy-in of the client, this isn't going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. So they have some expectations set forth, they have to do, and then we have another 7 days then to follow up with them. Once we do that, we then set our second meeting where we then are proposing what our firm is going to do and the timeline and what that looks like. And from there, they get onboarded, right? And there's a very specific onboarding process. Again, it's our brand. So everybody comes in exactly the same way. And that way, then if we're getting referrals from our clients, everyone's getting.
So you mentioned your marketing automation. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been able to automate from a client communication standpoint and also from a marketing standpoint, and how that's been helpful, not just from a time saving perspective, but maybe in terms of consistency in messaging and communication to the client.
Yeah. And I think, it all goes back to your brand consistency, right? So what's highly replicatable inside of my firm that I do day in and day out, but may take up more resources than I need it to take out. So for us, it's as soon as someone gets signed up as a prospect, they're getting put into a group that they get 3 automated emails. It's just explaining our firm, what we do, getting them more familiar with how we kind of work. Then they have their first meeting. Then they're going to get a reminder email. I believe it's every 72 hours, letting them know that these are the expectations for them in order to move forward with our firm. Then once they sign their engagement letter, now they're in the onboarding group. And in the onboarding group, it's like, here's what you can expect. Here's the additional items we need. Here's how we're going to do it. We kind of have a client playbook, I guess you could kind of call it. So it kind of sets those expectations, like this is all the deadlines inside of our firm, but here are the deadlines to you in order for us to meet our deadlines. We don't want any surprises, right? We want everybody to know exactly what's going to happen in a 12-month cycle. And I think once you kind of take some of that guesswork off the table, clients tend to, go down a little bit, because taxes, money, business, checking accounts, savings accounts, credit cards, all that stuff to normal people, they don't want to talk about it and they don't want to know about it. They just want it done. But at the end of the day, they have to know what's going to happen in a year cycle so that they can do their part. And again, there's no surprises. Beyond that, we then, after they're a client, they get into Harper's Hub. So once a month, we send out a newsletter to them, whatever might be relevant, spotlighting, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's a new ruling that came out, maybe it's a new deadline, maybe there's a new sign-in process. Whatever it is, we just believe education and transparency and communication are key with our clients. And so that's how we use marketing automation, is make sure we're communicating, we're transparent, and we're educating.
I think you guys really stand out to me from the standpoint that you have literally looked at your business and applied automation to every possible process, but do such a good job of applying it in such a way that there's still the appropriate human touch. So clients are getting consistent information, prospects are being nurtured, and people are also getting good content and valuable insights at all time. And I think that's important too, because one of the things that we talk a lot about, that Brad and I talk a lot about with firms, is you really can't expect to go from being old school, sort of transactional, I do tax returns and bookkeeping, to I now am an advisor and I want to sell advisory services, without creating some insightful content that you're putting out there and not asking for anything in return. And I think that's another thing that you guys do really well. You've got lots of different channels set up that you push content out from, whether it's, specific content that's designed for clients, or drip content that's designed to nurture those prospects who might not be ready today, but a month from now, they might be ticked at their current provider, or something could happen, or they could get an email that's telling them something that their CPA never bothered to tell them before, and they decide that it's the right time to make a change. And so something that I just want to point out that I've observed you guys do very well is execute across multiple channels from a marketing and sales perspective. Because oftentimes we'll have firms say, well, I just want to get more leads. What do I need to do? And Brad and I sometimes scratch our heads and we're like, okay, where do we start here? Because it's a long time strategy. Like, we've been working together for years now, Julie, and it's a long-term process to really be able to have a vision for what your strategy is, implement that vision, pivot along the way, as you always say, to borrow one of your terms, and constantly be evolving, and results do come. It just takes time, right?
Well, and I think you said two key things. It's pivoting. So I'll be the first one to tell you, I have had to pivot more times than I've probably had success, right? Because I'm like, oh, I have this great idea and I can see it, but I can't quite make it come to fruition the way that I envisioned it. And so it's just tweaking or pivoting or doing whatever it is, but don't be afraid of that. Like, as entrepreneurs, as firm owners, as practice managers, that's your job. Your job is to not lead from a place of fear. Your job is to kind of push forward, to push the envelope, be progressive, lead your team. They're going to follow. Most teammates want something that's new and exciting, right? The old joke of like, well, we're just going to do what we did last year. Like, I hate that, right? Well, what did we do last year, but how do we make it better? What are our clients saying? When you guys are out there having conversations, what do they want? As you're in listening to your team, from my perspective, I still have a cubicle. I work in a cubicle amongst every single person, and I hear every single thing. And there's a reason, because I hear someone, I can go provide that solution. Or I'm like, ooh, you're right. You're onto something. Let's create something. Let's work together and create something. Your team loves that. and it's your brand. Internal, external, they're all a part of your brand. So, it's not necessarily all my ideas, but like I'm happy to be the one that falls on their face once or twice and takes that, right? Till we get to where we need to be. But again, I think it's being able to give yourself grace, pivot, but don't lead from a place of fear. It will work out if you're committed to doing it and seeing
But
it
there's
through.
no
It
easy
will
pill,
work
right?
out.
There's no quick pill either, right? You can't just
Ugh,
go, okay, I have 1 month or 3 months to
yeah,
bring in this. It just doesn't work that way. It takes time. It's a
no.
process. And you're right. You can't lead from a place of fear because no matter what happens, you're going to learn from it. You're going to grow from it and things will always work out. They will always be okay. Right.
And I think, in our
Mm-hmm.
podcast, we talk a lot about peaks and valleys. Marketing and branding
Yeah.
is just goes
Yeah.
along with it, right? There's peaks and there's valleys. So you may be at the top of the mountain one day, and in a week you're at the bottom going, okay,
Right.
what did I screw up and how do I fix this? Right? Like, how do I pivot to make this better? How do I beat out my competition? How do I stay within the realms of what I've said my vision and mission are to make sure that this marketing and branding works, whatever that is? And oftentimes your answers are so close. Like I said, having those conversations with your internal team, having a conversation with a trusted client to say, hey, I was thinking about this. Would this make your life better or would it make it worse? Because we just want to make it better, but I don't want to go through this process if at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, no one's going to do it, right? That's the worst feeling. And so I think those answers are so close. It's just having those organic conversations where people are going to buy into whatever you're doing because you're
Yeah,
giving them an
interesting.
opinion as
So
well.
what happens when one of the things that I've heard you say and that I really love about your firm is that you've got marketing really ingrained in every process and you do a very good job of marketing internally as well as externally. So what happens when you have someone internally potentially who may not buy into your brand or your messaging? How does that work?
Long term or short term? No. Um, Short term, it's just going back to the basics. So we have an employee playbook. It expels out all the expectations. So, you
Mhm.
talk about client onboarding, and I know we've talked a lot about that. We kind of use the same thing internally as well. So our new teammates, right, all get the same type of onboarding. So it's the same employee playbook. They're all being told the exact same thing. We
Mhm.
just started, Janelle, you and I, you take a lot of my ideas and I really appreciate it and making them come to fruition because sometimes they're crazy and you'll tell me that and I do appreciate that. But we had a Harper's Hub for our external clients. Well, why wouldn't we have something internally? Why are we not celebrating and all having that same message monthly
Yeah.
cohesively to make sure everybody's on the same page? I can have staff meetings all I want, right? But it's reaffirming whatever it is that's going on or where we're going or what we're doing, reaffirming that, celebrating the small wins, celebrating all the new clients that we're bringing in and who's taking responsibility for that. Putting pen to paper for some reason is a lot better than
You know,
whatever words that come out of my
you bring up
mouth.
such a good point because that
Um,
goes back to marketing
yeah.
internally. And it also goes back to something else you said earlier about
Mm-hmm.
still having a cubicle in the middle of the office and being able to kind of have ear to the ground and hear what people are saying, observe what people are maybe frustrated with or challenges that they're having, and being able to get ahead of that before it takes on a toxic life of its own, right? And so, and not just get ahead of it, but constantly be willing to implement ideas that are going to better the lives of the people that work in the firm and put them as first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've heard people and I've heard firms say before, you know what, sometimes we'll even let our accountants go through the client list and decide, hey, which clients do we need to cull because they're not so great for us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an empowering thing. But I think everything that you are doing in the firm is really through the mindset of empowering every single employee there to be able to take ownership, to feel like they're very clear on their part of your entire vision and they know exactly how to implement it. But that all goes back to the messaging, right? The messaging, not just external, but what you're saying internally.
Right. But I also think at the end of the day, if someone's not going to buy in to what you're doing, it's a lot easier to go up a mountain when everyone's moving in the same direction. If you're wearing a boulder in your backpack
Mm-mm.
going up a mountain, it's not fun. And when you start to feel like you're having to overcompensate or you're trying to talk someone into something, and it goes on for a long period of time, you kind of have to take a step back and be like, okay, is this what's best for the rest of the team? Because oftentimes you'll hear, Glenn says this too, a lot of times, like, well, where
Mm-hmm.
the work still has to get done, right? How many times do you hear that when you go into a firm? Like they're almost afraid to hold people to an expectation and accountability because of the staffing situation, right? And so build a bench so that, you know what, if someone's not the right fit, they got to go. You'll easily figure that out. And I don't want to say
Right.
that people are dispensable. I don't want that to come across in what I'm saying, but I'm saying it's a really hard thing is once you build a culture, it's a really hard thing if it gets torn down by one toxic employee. It's a really hard thing if one person's going against the grain and putting seeds of doubt into anybody else's mind. You want to get rid of that, squash it,
Mm-hmm.
push it down as fast as possible.
Yeah, but all these things that you've done, the playbook and all the, the portal for your employees and things like that. I mean, that's all obviously that's culture, but it's also, you have something to look at so that you know specifically that they're not a fit with
Mm-hmm.
what you've got going on versus just like if you don't have those things in place, then it's just like you don't really have like this barometer that you can measure against specifically. And so I think that's really good. And then the other thing, when you're talking about pivoting, I mean, really you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
innovation, right? You're innovating off of your model. And when you have these things in place, you're able to do that. And then you're able to really a lot of it is testing, right? You're trying things out.
Yeah.
You're seeing what works, what doesn't work, how your team reacts to success and failure and things like that. So, having
Well, I think
those
you bring
things
up
in
a good
place
point
is
too, Brad,
super
because
important.
I think innovation is a key word. And I think that it seems to be, a lot of accounting firms, that's hard, right? It's hard for them to step outside themselves and go, wait a minute, I run a business. I need to be willing to try some things. I need to be innovative. I need to do things differently. And I think sometimes um, accountants are very analytical. They're professionals. They are trained to do a certain thing. And sometimes that doesn't always align with being innovative or being open to being innovative. And that's really important because accounting firms don't look
No.
today like they did back in 1990 at all.
No, and the thing is, Julie, she mentioned like foundation, and I always like to talk about foundation because my favorite analogy is golf. As a golfer, and a lot of people are golfers, like when I'm struggling, I go back to like my setup, just like the basics. You go back to your setup and sometimes, I'll take a break. Like I won't even play golf, because it's just in my head. Because most people know how to hit the ball. It's just a matter of being able to do it over and over again, right? And repeating it. But so the capability is there. So taking that break is helpful. And then just going back down to the fundamentals, right? So with accounting, I think it would be, or any business really, but really understanding like, well, what is it? What is the
Mm-hmm.
fundamentals? Like, what am I actually doing? What am I doing? What do I do? How do I help people? Like, and getting down to the essentials of the value that you're providing and all those things can really help you figure out, okay, from here, where do I go next? And building on those blocks, the building blocks.
So, Brad, you say something really interesting, and it's our
Mm-hmm.
foundation, and we always go back to it. Our firm does not provide financials or a tax return. Sure, we have to do it compliance wise. We are selling client
Mm-hmm.
relationships. That's it. And when we interview, when we start that process of bringing on a new team member, like you have to be able to effectively communicate on the phone and email. You have to be able to have a conversation with them that is not in an accounting world. Like we always laugh because I'm like, if I can understand what you're saying, you can go have the same conversation with the clients, right? If you lose me, I'm like, you can't talk to them like that, right? And so it's funny because I think if you talk to most firm owners, they're doing tax returns
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing accounting or some function of. Yeah, we have to do that to stay compliant in order to have those conversations, in order to have the relationship. But our approach is not that we are selling accounting or tax returns. Ours is that we want the relationship so that we can pull whatever levers we need to pull. I'm going to be, not me personally, but my team is going to be the first one that you
Mm-hmm.
call when you think about buying a new car. My team is going to be the first team that you're going to call when you're going to sell stock. My team is going to be the first team that you call when you're thinking about starting another business. You're just thinking about it. You haven't even executed yet. And that's what we really strive for. That's our foundation, and getting back to that. And sometimes, I mean, I go through it just like anybody else. Sometimes I feel like our firm starts wanting to churn out tax returns and wants to start churning out financials. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Back to the basics, guys. Pick up the phone and have a conversation today. Figure out why we're doing what we're doing. It is not for that 120-page tax return, I can assure you. It is because we have a relationship with these clients that allows us to get that tax return complete.
And that's really, to me, that's the essence of being a trusted advisor. Like that's what you're trying to be. But like, in order, you have to build that trust, right?
Yeah.
You have to build that trust, and you do it by implementing all these different things that we just talked about. And I think that's the way to get to those premium advisory services and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because anyone can do a tax return. I assure you. Anyone can do QuickBooks.
Well, not me.
Maybe even me if you get lucky. But at the end of the day, it's the relationship that's going to set us apart.
That is,
I
agree with that 100%. And I think that there's something I would love your insight on as we kind of bring things to a close. And we talk to a lot of firm owners who they feel stuck, and they feel stuck from in one side of their head, in the visionary business side of their head. They think, we want to start selling more advisory type services, whatever that means to them. Could be CAS, could be outsourced CFO, whatever it is. And so we'll hear that. And then you hear, but, we're still really stuck in, in tax return world, or stuck doing bookkeeping. So what do we do? How do we take that first step? What would your best piece of advice be to those firm owners who feel like they've got one foot on each side and they want to really move the needle with their firm so that they're capturing more clients who will pay them whatever they pay them on a monthly basis, and fewer that all they care about is their price? They really don't value that relationship.
Yeah, I think to put it into perspective, Glenn and I started out on this journey 7 years ago, and we are still evolving. We are still changing. We are still trying to put the right people in the right seats with the right clients. Like, just because I'm on this podcast doesn't mean I have it all figured out. I don't. But I would encourage you to have an accountability partner. If you're a firm owner, maybe that's another partner, maybe that's your practice manager. But share exactly what you want to do and hold each other accountable to take at least the first step, then the second step. For us, who cares about all your tax return clients? Those are great clients. You've had them for probably years upon years. Don't get rid of them in the beginning, but start with every new client that comes through the door, and then keep tweaking the process as you go through it. Our first client is, I don't think we do one thing that we did that we onboarded that first client with. And that's okay, right? That's completely fine, but be willing to at least say, I'm going to rip off the Band-Aid and I'm going to start this process. And here, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to start with the engagement letter. Okay, I'm going to start with the prospect questionnaire. I don't truly care what it is that you start with. Start the steps, because if you don't do anything, then you're taking zero action. We know you're going to be in the same place next year.
This is such great advice. You are a wealth of knowledge, and we really appreciate you being able to take some time out of your day and come on and join us and give us some wisdom and some insights and some ideas that hopefully other firms that are listening to this can take and kind of put into practice in their own business. So Julie, thank you so much. If anybody wanted to connect with you, where would they find you?
So we have Harper CPA Plus, Empower CPA.com, empowering entrepreneurs.
The
You can find me on LinkedIn, Julie Smith. The Julie. There's a whole story behind that. But yeah,
All right.
so
Thank you
I'm
so
happy to
much.
connect with
Appreciate it.
anybody.